Today we're going to talk about why people are becoming more and more anxious and depressed. And it has nothing to do with your genetics or your upbringing or your personality. The reason for all the anxiety and depression is your environment. That may be hard to hear if you have a person in your life who is blaming you for being anxious or depressed. But stick with me because I am going to break down how the world around you impacts your mood. If you're new here, welcome. So first, let's talk about a few things that don't cause anxiety and depression. This is why having social media accounts doesn't satisfy our need for human connection. These accounts only give us the illusion of connection. Humans need actual human connection. We want to believe that we matter in this world. But some people struggle with believing that they deserve to have their needs met. They may think that they're not good enough or beautiful enough or smart enough. Some people are raised in environments where they hear these types of negative messages about themselves. Other times people compare themselves to unrealistic standards portrayed on social media. And yet other times people are criticized for their appearance or intelligence or success. When you don't understand something, it can cause fear and anxiety. Even getting less than optimal amounts of sleep can affect your mood. When you don't feel safe in your environment, you live in constant fear. You become hypervigilant. Loneliness, lack of purpose, lack of self-worth, lack of control, lack of joy, lack of self-confidence, lack of knowledge, and lack of sleep or safety. Just because you experience these things doesn't mean that they're the cause of your anxiety or depression. Sometimes these things are a result of living with anxiety or depression. You may jump at noises or feel triggered by ordinary situations. You may feel like you're always on edge. All of this tension can lead to anxiety and depression. For example, if you normally sleep 8 hours a night and you're only sleeping 7 hours a night, you can become more irritable. You can feel more anxious, and you're more vulnerable to depression. For example, if you're diagnosed with a chronic medical illness, you may become anxious because you're afraid of the unknown. You may become anxious when you face a new challenge that you've never experienced before. Lack of knowledge can also lead to depression. For example, when you're depressed, you may feel apathetic. You may lose interest in hobbies or activities that you used to enjoy. You may feel too numb to ask questions or seek clarification. You may feel like you have nothing to offer. All of these feelings can lead to depression. Whatever the case, believing that you're not worthy leads to anxiety and depression. This is because when you don't think you're worthy, you don't think you deserve to have your needs met, so you suffer unnecessarily. From the time we are born, we need to be soothed by another person's touch. When you don't feel like you have any control over your life, that can cause anxiety. You may feel helpless, hopeless, and panicked. This can happen when you're experiencing abuse or neglect. Or it can happen when you're experiencing grief. For example, after a serious illness, some people never regain their sense of control, and they remain anxious long after they're physically recovered. Another example is financial worry. When you're struggling financially, it's hard to feel in control. And this worry can quickly become all-consuming, affecting sleep, concentration, and overall quality of life. We need to look into another person's eyes and see our own humanity reflected back at us. They may enjoy spending time in nature. They may find pleasure in creative endeavors like painting or writing. They may find humor in everyday situations. They may find joy in their relationships. When you stop experiencing joy in your life, you start to feel empty and hopeless. And this feeling can lead to depression. When we don't get these things, we die. It's not an exaggeration to say that loneliness can kill you. But some people tend to be more shy and reserved. If you're naturally shy and reserved, you may feel anxious when you're placed in situations where you have to perform or behave in a way that's unnatural to you. For example, you may feel compelled to speak up in a group setting, but you're so nervous about what others will think of you that you freeze up. Or you may want to apply for a new job with better pay and benefits. But you doubt your abilities and don't think you can do the job, so you don't apply. These are examples of how lack of self-confidence can cause anxiety. In fact, researchers found that loneliness increases the risk of dying prematurely by 26%. Loneliness also puts you at increased risk for depression and anxiety. And the craziest part about loneliness is that you can be physically surrounded by people and still feel lonely. For example, if you're living with roommates but you don't feel connected to them, or you have no close friends, you can feel lonely. Or you can be in a relationship where you're spending a lot of time together, but you still feel disconnected from your partner. Here's a helpful tip to recognize if you're feeling lonely. Ask yourself, if someone offered you a chance to meet one new friend, would you take that opportunity? If the answer is yes, then you know you're lonely. You didn't inherit your anxiety from your parents. You didn't inherit your anxiety from your parents. Having a sense of purpose in life is a fundamental human need. And when we don't have purpose, we feel empty and directionless. You can experience a lack of purpose in many different ways. Maybe you lost your job and you don't have any plans to replace it. Maybe you're in school and you don't feel inspired by your studies. Maybe you're in a relationship that feels more like a chore than a partnership. Or maybe you're caring for children or aging parents and you don't have time for anything else. Whatever the reason, feeling like your life has no purpose will lead to depression and anxiety. There's no personality trait that makes you predisposed to anxiety or depression. So if someone tells you that you're anxious, you're too much of a worrier, or you're depressive because your personality is too negative, that's wrong. You can have a sunny disposition and still be anxious or depressed. You can be very easygoing and still be struggling with major depressive disorder. A difficult childhood may lead to other mental health problems, but it doesn't create anxiety. In fact, some of the most resilient people I've met had rough childhoods, but they seem to have no issues with anxiety or depression. Contrary to popular belief, mental illness is not transmitted like heart disease or diabetes. You can grow up with a parent who had anxiety or depression, and you can even have a genetic variant that puts you at risk for anxiety. But you don't actually inherit the anxiety itself. If you did, then every child of an anxious parent would become anxious. This isn't true. And also, having a difficult childhood doesn't cause anxiety. Your personality is not the reason you're feeling anxious. You're not too sensitive. One of my favorite sayings is that there's no such thing as too sensitive. People tell this to others to mean that the person is overreacting or making too big a deal out of something. But being sensitive is not a bad thing. Sensitivity means that you care. It means that you have empathy. It means that you feel deeply. Being sensitive does not cause depression or anxiety. Now that we got those basics out of the way, let's talk about what does contribute to anxiety and depression. Number one is loneliness. Our brains are wired for connection. We crave belonging to a group. The next reason is lack of purpose. We're not just social creatures. We're also goal-oriented. The third reason is lack of self-worth. Most of us want to believe that we're worthy of love and belonging. Lack of control. Next is lack of joy. Life is painful. None of us can avoid pain. But most people find ways to experience joy in life. Next is lack of self-confidence. Some people are naturally more confident than others. They're outgoing and seek out new experiences. Next is lack of knowledge. Lack of sleep. Sleep deprivation causes both anxiety and depression. It doesn't have to be insomnia either. Finally, here's a big one. Lack of safety. To recap, here are the reasons that have nothing to do with your genetics or personality or upbringing that can cause anxiety and depression. These 8 reasons are the most common reasons that people become anxious or depressed. But remember, correlation does not equal causation. That's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching. See you next time.